On the West Midlands regional news the other day, the figure came out that in 2010 there were 4 food banks in the West Midlands, and now there are 41. You mentioned earlier about over 900,000 people in the UK using them. And David Cameron's answer to that was that the increase was because they had allowed Job Centre Plus to advertise the food banks and to be part of the system recommending people. What's the Green Party stance on that?
Goodness. To me, that's a very heartless comment that David Cameron made there. I mean, if something exists, then it exists because people need it, and so they need to be aware that it exists so that they can make full benefit of this. Green Party obviously feel that most people that are using food banks are the working poor. They're living on a wage that they can't afford to look after themselves. So we would be looking to introduce a living wage of £10 an hour by 2020. We would also look to address the issue of 0 hours contracts. I know as someone that runs a household myself, you need to be able to budget and to know what sort of meals you're going to be having for the rest of the week, how you're going to pay your bills, and to be waiting for a text message the next morning to know whether you've got work or not is something that's you can't actually plan your life that way. So we would look to really clamp down on 0 hours contracts as well and make sure that people were paid a fair wage for a fair day's work. Food banks, in my opinion, are necessary at the moment because people cannot afford to live, and at a time when we're the 6th richest nation in the world, that's just not acceptable in my opinion.
People in the churches, some of them are actually quite angry about these food banks, and personally angry because, as we know, a lot of the food bank work is actually coming out of the churches. We have receptacles, we are collection centres at both the churches. They're across other people in businesses and so on across Wyre Forest. But I know that what people feel is that they are largely on modest incomes themselves. They are paying their taxes. They are giving to charity. They are volunteering many hours. And they are putting the food on other people's tables because the state isn't doing so. And while we would never, as church communities, stop doing that, there is the question, is it morally right to ask us to do that?
That's a tough question, really. I think somebody needs to do it, and I think as pillars of the community in churches, and you offer free, safe, welcoming places for people to come to, that perhaps you are in the best position to do it because people feel they can access services from yourselves. I know that it's largely run by volunteers, etc., and that's putting a lot of pressure on people. But I would just question where else they would be if they weren't in churches, really, and where would people be able to get that help from that they desperately need.
But is it morally right that while it's laudable and there is a sense of being able to do something when you put food in a food bank, you feel empowered to help someone else. It feels, looking at it from the other side, that someone is having to receive that as charity.
What we should be doing is helping people get on their feet and making sure they can afford to look after themselves, which is why we're so focused on introducing this living wage and also looking at fuel poverty and rent and all sorts of things that would help people to get out of this poverty trap that they've been sucked into really in the last 10 years. So I think responsibility does come to local and central government to make sure that these people can better look after themselves rather than having to rely on charity. But at the moment, they're having to rely on the charity, so it's good that it's there for them to come to.